What is good, all you cool cats and kittens? It's your commissioner back at you on a week 11 recap. I've got some fun video this week for you. Spent a lot of time preparing this video with a lot of numbers, just getting nerdy, using time I don't have to come up with this video. So I hope you guys enjoy it. So I'll get started with some important week 12 announcements. Remember that week 12, it is trade deadline. There will be no trades at the conclusion of week 12 on Monday Night Football games this upcoming week. It means that on Sleeper, you can't even make trades, let alone accept it when that conclusion game happens. So Brandon and I will not be trying to make any of the trades actually take place. So just make sure if Sleeper doesn't allow it, it means that trade deadline has passed. So get active. Looking forward to seeing y'all being able to make some big moves this week. All right. So to get quickly started with the week 11 matchups, there were no pick'ems that I sent out last week, so we'll make it pretty quick. So we had this matchup. Obviously, I think the matchup of the week would have been the matchup between Trust the Process and Brady Stir Dynasty. Keep in mind, week 11 means we are now completed with our second week of the cycling of the matchups that we've had since week one. So week 11 representing the matchups that we had in week two. The 4 out of the 5 matchups were the same results. So it means sweeps against the opponents by Brad, Travis, Kyle, and Sergey. And I was able to split and revenge against Brady Stir Dynasty, going 1-1 on the season against Ryan with this week. This loss doesn't, like I said early on in other videos, regarding the top 2 buy seed race that clearly Ryan is in. Even back then, a few weeks back, a loss to anyone in the top 4 would not have made a move in terms of the likelihood of them being able to finish in the top 2. Certainly, this is the case, and I'll dive into this regarding Ryan's numbers. So even though he does fall back now at third, looking into the top 2, you're going to see that doesn't really move the needle that much. Okay, so that said, let's jump into our playoff races. I'm going to focus on in the 2 races regarding the 5th and 6th seed, and we're going to get started off with the most important of them all, which is the top 2 buy seeds. So we got 3 games remaining now, and still today, I think the projected win-loss cutoff is going to be 12-2 to get securely into that mix. Obviously, we have the 3 teams in the mix: Mr. Master, Montgomery Cats, Brady Stir Dynasty. That's been the race basically since week 3. And they continue to have amazing seasons. And congratulations to Sergey and Kyle for being the first 2 teams with double-digit wins on the season. That is never an easy task. And the fact that you guys have already done it with just 11 weeks in the season, I think that's amazing. I'm excited about the progression of your teams going forward. All right, so I'm going to dive it team by team, a little bit of a highlight. And I'll do the same section for the 5th and 6th seed races. So into Mr. Ambassador, he's sitting at 10-1, tied first with Montgomery Cats. If you look at the remaining games, he's got Huge Dicka, Montgomery Cats, which is going to be a sexy game, and you got Full Jerry on the final week of the season. And the head-to-head record of all seasons, I have this here where if you take Mr. Ambassador's scores from week 1 through week 11, and then you match them up against the remaining the matchups that he's going to have. So his record of being 6-5 against Huge Dicka means that in the 11 weeks played through the season, if Huge Dicka and Mr. Ambassador were going head to head the entire time, Mr. Ambassador actually only ends up with a 6-5 record against Huge Dicka. As I've called out multiple times on Sleeper Chat, Mr. Ambassador has it's phenomenal how consistent Sergey is. His standard deviation is a hair over 9 on 9 points on any given week, and the second most consistent team is north of 20. The worst team, even in the top 7, the worst team being 30-point variation. So I don't think I've ever seen a team that is that consistent, especially at the high performing scoring marks that Sergey's been able to put up. So he's got a massively consistent team. That said, Huge Dicka obviously has had a lot of phenomenal weeks, especially in the second half of the season so far with the breakout of Jonathan Taylor. Let's just say the second breakout of Jonathan Taylor. Now that he's finally healthy, he's got a competent quarterback, finally able to utilize his full skill sets and a healthy offensive line, probably one of the best in the league. So I was surprised by that 6-5 record against him. And then against the Montgomery Cats, Mr. Ambassador actually has a winning record of 6-5 against him as well. And then he's got a matchup against Full Jerry, who he's gone 9-2 against. So if you add all that up, the expected wins for Mr. Ambassador for the rest of the schedule is going to be 1.91 wins remaining. And I'll talk about sort of the matchups and the summary in a little bit, but let's talk about Moncton Meerkats. Same record as Sergey, currently in the top 2 remaining games. He's got a freebie, a bye week coming up this week against Two Shots No Cup, and then Mr. Ambassador. And then finishing out the season, Trust the Process in week 14. That I think is probably going to be where the race for the top 2 is finalized as well. So head-to-head for him, undefeated against Two Shots No Cup. Losing record, as I said, 5-6 against Mr. Ambassador, and then also a losing record against Trust the Process, which I was surprised to see going 5-6. Even if you add all those things up, even though he's got a losing record against the 2 tougher teams here, just because that guaranteed 11-1, at least the way that I calculated it, guaranteed 11-0 basically means that in the expected wins, he's got that 1. So he is tied with Sergey in terms of expected wins, but I do think this is going to be a bit of a tougher schedule compared to Mr. Ambassador when you're comparing the rest of the season schedule between those 2 teams. Still, with the winning record and a game ahead of Ryan, I think that puts him certainly within the favored to be one of the top 2. Moving over to Brady Stewart Dynasty, he's sitting at 9-2, sold second now, or sold third, I should say. Remaining games, though, if you look at his schedule, he's got Full Jerry, Bills Mafia, and he's got Huge Dicka. So if you look at his head-to-head record against all season so far, 92 against Full Jerry, 11-0 against Bills Mafia, and a really nice 7-4 against Huge Dicka, which is better than Moncton Meerkats, Mr. Ambassador's head-to-head against Huge Dicka. So Brady Stewart Dynasty does have the most wins expected over the remaining 3 games, but he is a game back. The one thing that Brady Stewart Dynasty does have going favorably for him is the fact that he is sitting at first, and he's been sitting at first for much of the season at points for, and certainly ahead of Mr. Ambassador and Moncton Meerkats in the weeks that he was not. I believe Moncton Meerkats had it for 1 week and came back to Brady Stewart Dynasty. So all of this really just goes down to say that right now, because of the points for, and obviously I did the calculation assuming the points for standing stays true, all 3 teams still control their own destiny, and winning out for any 3 teams really guarantees the top 2, even for Brady Stewart Dynasty. And that's true because in week 13, you've got the Moncton Meerkats going against the Mr. Ambassador, meaning one of the teams in the top 2 will have at least 1 more loss. So winning out in that scenario would get Brady Stewart Dynasty, if the points for tiebreaker stays true, the ability for him to really control his own destiny. I was really surprised at the probability of all the different simulations of what the likelihood of the 3 getting into one of the top 2 seeds. And this is not about who finishes 1 or 2. This is about who finishes in either 1 or 2. It's really a split between 70, 65, 65. It's as even as you can get across the board, even through 11 weeks in the season. So I think the other thing to note, because of how razor tight the margins are, outside of the week 13 matchup between Moncton Meerkats and Mr. Ambassador, any other loss by any other team, any team of the 3 for the rest of the weeks, will have an impact of at minimum a 30% haircut to the probability of them making the top 2. So this race, I believe very much so, is going to go down to week 14. And Moncton Meerkats has a tough matchup coming against Huge Dicka, so we'll talk about a lot of this, but the inflection games here is week 12, Huge Dicka versus Moncton, Mr. Ambassador. You got week 13, that highlight matchup. I think that's going to be the one for the season. Week 14 is going to be Moncton Meerkats versus Trust the Process, which will be a tough matchup, and he's got a losing record. And Brady Stewart Dynasty against Huge Dicka there as well, which is not an easy matchup by any means. Brady Stewart Dynasty has the best record against Huge Dicka at 7-4, but it's only a 7-4 in the 11 weeks, so it's nothing that's guaranteed by any means. All right, so let's now look into the other race that's actually shaping up quite well. So it's the race for the 5th and the 6th seeds. Again, I don't know. I said this last week. I don't know if this race should really be called for the last 2 playoff seeds, because any of them could also end up at 4. But right now, probability-wise, is that I will be at least good for one of the playoff seeds. So this is just for the 2 shoe in terms of the rest of the season numbers. I got the projected cutoff at 6'8". The teams in play for this analysis is Huge Dicka, Wuxi Fingerhold, and got full Jerry. So starting off with Huge Dicka and Travis sitting at 5'6", tied for fifth. Remaining games, he's got a tough schedule. So Mr. Ambassador, Wuxi Fingerhold, which again, that's like the matchup of the week 14, week 13 matchups. That's important for the top two race in Montemayor against Mr. Ambassador. That's the most important race for the bottom two, I think. And he finished out the season against Brady Stir Dynasty. So the head-to-head records: 5-6 against Mr. Ambassador, 7-4 against Wuxi Fingerhold, and 4-7 against Brady Stir Dynasty. So based on all these things, the probability based on the head-to-head here, independently for Huge Dicka to finish out the season, him finishing out at 5-9, meaning no more wins, is 12.6%. Not small, certainly not big, but certainly not marginal by any means. And the probability of him winning just one more of the remaining three is actually the plural majority, most likely here, given at almost 40% chance. He does have almost as likely a chance of winning two more games at 37%, and the least amount of chance that he wins out. He's got a bigger chance of losing the rest of the three than it is for him to win all three. So Travis, I think expected wins added from here is something like 1.6 or something like that, if I remember right. But he is right now, in terms of the expected standings, sitting at fifth. So he's positioned here. Now you got Wuxi Fingerhold, same record as Travis. He's also got a pretty interesting record. So Trusted Process, tough. Huge Dicka, tough. And then Bills Mafia seems like it should be a shoe-in, but if you look at the head-to-head, he is 3-8 against Trusted Process, 4-7, like I mentioned on Huge Dicka, against Huge Dicka here. And he is just 6-5 against Bills Mafia. The two teams, Wuxi Fingerhold and Bills Mafia, have about a 20 points difference per week in terms of scores, but weirdly, they've been inverse of each other in terms of the weeks that Bills Mafia scored well, or the weeks that Wuxi Fingerhold wouldn't score well, would score one of his worst. So that really is going to add in a lot into this probability of end of the year record, because it is based on the head-to-head records of the season so far. So Wuxi Fingerhold, given the tough schedule ahead, there's a 21% likelihood that Brad does not win any of the remaining three games. But the plural majority again here, just like Travis, the biggest probability is, the most likely is that he wins one more, finishes the season at 6-8. But he's got about a third of a chance where he's going to win at least two more games. Now, if he wins, talk this a little bit more on the John scenario, but for Brad, I think if he wins one more, which is the plural majority here, it will give him a big leg up in terms of the likelihood of him making one of the playoff spots that's remaining. All right, so I'm going to jump into John. Obviously, he had a loss last week, and it may have felt like he's completely out of the playoff picture, given the fact that he's game behind, and he's behind on points for, where he's certainly not going to be winning the playoff race against Travis if they are ever at points for tiebreaker, given the gap now. And he's also needed, he's down by 80 points against Wuxi Fingerhold. With 3 games remaining, that's significant in terms of the points for that he does need to make up. But for Jerry, I got a 4-7, tied at 7 right now, looking in. And the remaining games, tough. Bracer Dynasty, 2 shots, no cup, Mr. Ambassador. Head-to-head record for all seasons: 2-9 against Bracer Dynasty, 10-1 against 2 shots, no cup, and 2-9 against Mr. Ambassador. So that 2-9 is also a little bit deceptive, because John had that weeks, I believe week 8, week 9, where he was the first or the top or the second highest score in the league for those 2 consecutive back-to-back weeks, where we really thought his team was catching on fire. And it's considerably cooled off since then. So anything up for grabs, but for now, if you look at John for the race for one of the remaining playoff seeds, the probability, doing the same exercise that I've done with Travis and Brad here, the probability of him ending the year, given the fact that he's matched up against 2 shots, no cup, and then if you look at the parentheses here, I've got him at a 25% winning on the tiebreaker. You can make the argument it should be less, given the fact that he has to make up 80 points. I just didn't want to tinker with that. So the probability on a playoff-based scenario, if there are any, in terms of a tiebreaker, would be at 25%. So him winning no more games for the rest of the season is actually the lowest compared to the other two teams that were featured here because of this 10-1 record against Two Shots No Cup that he faces in week 13. But if he only wins one more game, there's a 0% likelihood, or if he wins zero games, there's a 0% likelihood of making the playoffs given the game difference. Now, he's got almost a 64%, 2/3 chance of him winning at least one more game because of that matchup in week 13 against Eve. If he does so, there's an 8.4% chance that John gets into the playoffs if that's what he ends up with this end of the year record. If he wins two more matchups, there's a 27% chance of him winning two more matchups. If he does that, there's about half a 50-50 coin flip for him to be able to make the playoffs. If he's able to go improbable, which based on the head-to-head record here, it's about a 3% chance. If he goes 3-0, then he's at 93% chance to make the playoffs. So all that said, it sort of wraps up where Travis and Brad are the heavy favorites to make the playoffs over John, but John is still not out of it. Individually, he's got 21%, slightly tick over 21% in terms of his odds of making the playoffs. The most important matchup for this, there isn't really much to highlight. All teams have to sort of win out. But that said, I think depending on how week 12 and week 14 go, we're going to look at week 13 as the inflection game because of the matchup between Huge Zika and Wixie Fingerhold. The winner here will lock in the playoffs no matter what happens. All right, so I said there's a lot of data on this video. Obviously, I've done a lot of that stuff to come up with the previous slides to talk to you about this, but I want to show you something visual that I thought would be really, really interesting for when we do get into the playoffs and we're talking about it. Who are the contenders? I think for the first, 5 seasons of CCK so far, it's been probably, 2, maybe 3 teams where we really felt like there was a good chance of them being a contender. And I think in the certain preseasons leading into the seasons, I would say there was always a unanimous one, at most maybe unanimous top 2 in terms of who we all thought would be contenders. And by midseason, maybe that equals out or not with the moves. But we're past week 11. We're going into week 12 now, and I think there are significant number of contenders, and I wanted to show you that by numbers. So I did a fun exercise. When you look at the top 5 in terms of points for today, so that's Sergey, Kyle, Ryan, myself, and Travis. And if you did a head-to-head all play against each other, if this was just the league of 5, there would obviously be 44 total games that each team has sort of matched up against for individually, because that would be 4 matchups through 11 weeks. Meaning if you won 22 games, that means that you would have a 50% winning rate across the board. Obviously, if you look at the league as a large, if you look at our entire league so far, the lowest is at 5%, which would be Eve. The highest is still at some 60-70%, but or maybe slightly over 80%. But if you zoom in into the top 5, I want to show you how narrow this is. So you got the lowest at Travis, but even it's not low. It's at 36.3%. So more than a third of the time, when Travis is matched up against anyone, means 1 out of every 3 matchups, Travis will beat any of the other 4 teams in this list historically through 11 weeks. And if you run Travis's number specifically in just the last 5 weeks when his team has really caught on fire with Jonathan Taylor going off, that actually starts to jump up quite a bit. But just for the purposes of this, you got the loser, who's still better than a third of the games. And then this is how close it is. The leader in Ryan and Kyle, they win 56% of the games, which is it's less than a week's worth of points. So 4 games per week. It's less than a week's worth of games that's reflected between the leader sitting at 56.7% and Sergey and myself, who have split 50-50 against the top 5. Now, let's look at it now when the top 4. Sorry, Travis, I'm going to get rid of you for just this exercise. If you look at this, here's the leaders, here's everyone else. It's literally a game difference between what Ryan is able to do at 54.3%, and then you've got the remaining 3 at 48.5%. So the half being 16.5 games, it's like the 3 of us have 16 games out of the possible 33 games that's played. And then Ryan's the only one with 18. So It's incredible. It's honestly going to be a coin flip come playoff season. And that's why it's even more important because of how close everything across the board from a contender standpoint looks like, that the top three teams ensure that they secure themselves a top two bye seed. All right, so let's take me out of the situation and look at the top three. Here is Kyle, who is sitting in the middle at 50% out of the possible 22 games. He's won 11 games out of the 22. Here's everyone else. This is how close Ryan obviously leads the league. He's either first or tied for first across the 5, 4, 3 cuts that I've done. But this season, playoffs time, come playoff time, it's going to be an incredibly, incredibly fun experience for everyone. I think it's going to be full of just heartbreaks across the board. And I really can't tell you who's going to win, but just mathematically, going back to the top two seeds, with how close these matchups are, the probability of winning it all for these top three teams, the difference of them making the top two and getting that bye in week 15 versus if they have to play week 15, whether it's against Brad or anyone else, the probability of them making it is actually bettered by 50%. So that's incredibly different in terms of the types of expectations that we are seeing with how competitive everything is, especially in a, I can say top 5 of the 6 playoff seeds are contenders, as you've seen. So it's going to be really, really interesting. I'm really excited for how this league has shaped up, this dynasty. You got new teams on the rise. You got teams who rose like Sergey this year. You got other teams that are looking very, very bright, who are not quite at the contender, but certainly making playoffs, in players like Brad. John's got a lot of picks. He's going to be making moves. We'll see what Eve does, and we'll see what Kevin does. But I think the makeup of the league and the competitiveness of the league is certainly really, really dynamic in our dynasty league. All right, so that sort of summarizes everything. So you get a sense around sort of the power rankings that I'm going to be sharing heading into week 12. We got the playoff likelihoods as well as the championship odds in this. I'm not going to sneak it. I'm just going to go one blast here. These are movements from the last video, which is, I think, week 8. But take a look at the playoff probabilities. So starting from the top 3, you got Mr. Ambassador, Moncton Meerkats, Bracer Dynasty. You can really swip swap 1 and 2 back and forth between Sergey and Kyle here. But given the rest of the season scheduling favorability to Mr. Ambassador, even though their expected wins is about the same, I'm just going to give the little nod over to Mr. Ambassador there. And then you got Bracer Dynasty on the outside looking in, albeit with the easiest rest of the season schedule. So he's got a really good chance to at least be tied. And at that point, he's got a lead. He's got a decent lead, about 50 points and change against Moncton Meerkats and Mr. Ambassador. So in a span of 3 weeks, he would have to be worse than whoever he's going to be coming up against by at least 15 points, 15, 18, 20 points for the remaining 3 weeks, which is going to be pretty tough. So I think it's going to be okay to think about Bracer Dynasty likely retaining that points for tiebreaker. And then you got Trusted Process. Myself, I'm currently in second in points for, staying at 6 and 4. So the playoffs are pretty much locked with how I think the 5th and 6th seed cutoff line is going to become playoffs for the records that's needed. You got Huge Dicka, Wooksy Fingerhold, Full Jerry still in the mix. The playoff probability, Huge Dicka is at 90%, Brad's at 89%. So for them, if you look at it from an individual picture component, it's very likely that they are going to be the shoe-ins for the playoffs. But you got the one remaining player who's taking up the remaining 21% of the probabilities there, taking all of them for himself. So 21% chance, that's just slightly worse than having 2 heads in a row come coin flip time. So I think John's got a chance. Unfortunately, the thing that's really dragging down his playoff probability is actually directly tied to the fact that he most likely will not be able to win on a tiebreaker. And also keep in mind that the 21% represents if there is an event in which there is a tiebreaker event that needs to happen. I give John a 25% probability for him to do so. So you can sort of move down his probability and above that depending on where you have that threshold at. But at 25%, he's at 21% right now. With Bills Mafia, Kevin and Two Shots No Cup really out of the race. I mean, realistically, Bills Mafia still has some kind of a chance. Kevin and Eve are out, but I just wanted to be practical and only factor in the 3 teams for the probability of making the playoffs. All right, so that does it for the power rankings. We're going to move over to week 12 matchups looking. So we got the 5 matchups. There's about 2 that I want to focus on. And all of these matchups have some kind of implication with the exception of the bottom 2. The first one, if Wuxi Fingerhold is able to beat Trust the Process this week, it will move the needle in terms of going from 89% up to 95% probability. So basically increasing, closing out the gap of the remaining probability by more than 60%, going from 89 to 95. If he wins against the Trust Process here, the matchup against Full Jerry and Bracer Dynasty, I think it's easy to call it for a win for Bracer Dynasty, but obviously if Full Jerry wins here, this actually moves the needle significantly and tremendously for his individual odds of making the playoffs, probably close to a coin flip at that point if he beats Bracer Dynasty. And I think this week potentially may be possible because if you look at Bracer Dynasty's Week 12 roster, given all the buys, along with Jamar Chase's suspension for spitting on someone, if there is a week to do it, this would be the week. Obviously, John's got a significant losing record head-to-head against Bracer Dynasty. Bracer Dynasty, I think 2-9. But if there's a week, this is the week. And obviously, if Bracer Dynasty loses this week, it is very much likely his odds of being, I think, 60% likely to get one of the top 2 right now will drop almost down to like 20% or something like that. So this is very much a must-win for Bracer Dynasty as well. Huge Dicka matchup against Sergey. You got Huge Dicka, same thing, similar to Wuxi Fingerhold here. If Huge Dicka is able to pull off the win here, he does move up to about 95%. It's the same thing. So it's a seed above him. If he wins, he gets 95%. But if Mr. Ambassador loses here, just like I said before, if any of these teams, with the exception of the Week 14 matchup between Mr. Ambassador and Moncton Meerkats, any of the top 3 teams losing in any other matchup in any other week, it is going to decrease their individual likelihood of making the top 2 seed by more than 30%, depending on the matchup, but at minimum 30%. Right now, Mr. Ambassador is actually at the pole position in terms of the likelihood of getting into one of the top 2 seeds. A loss here against a team where he's, I believe, got a close to a losing record, if not a losing record. Against, let's see, he's got a 6-5 record against Huge Dicka, as I mentioned earlier. So basically a 50-50. If he loses here, this is going to decrease him going from pole position and now looking in the outside looking in, assuming all other things go as to expected plan and projections. And the remaining other 2 games, there aren't really much of a movement here. I'm obviously expecting, same thing goes to Moncton Meerkats, but he's not going to lose against Eve here. All right. So here's my commissioner picks of the week. It's pretty chalky. I actually thought about wanting to give this one over to John, but I think Bracer Dynasty is going to pull one. I do think Huge Dicka, with the way that he has been playing, and Jonathan Taylor now back from the bye, I do think Huge Dicka has a significant chance to be able to pull off a relative upset and really take down Sergey's chances at the top 2 here. So I've picked him, but everything else is pretty chalk. So that does it for our Week 11 recap and sort of Week 12 announcements. Trade deadline, don't forget about it. And hopefully you guys enjoyed some of the analysis and the data that I was sort of nerding over. Hopefully I don't have to spend so much time doing all this stuff, but appreciate it. Enjoy your Week 12, boys. Peace.